Good evening, dear dreamer, and welcome to Whispers of the Night. Tonight, let's slow the world down together and step into a place where rain falls softly, as if it's learned how to whisper. Imagine a hidden garden resting behind old stone walls, leaves darkened by gentle showers, the air cool and sweet with the scent of earth and flowers. Each raindrop lands with care, smoothing the edges of the day and inviting your thoughts to settle. As you get comfortable, I find myself wondering where you're listening from this evening. Somewhere beyond this garden, your own night is unfolding, quiet in its own way. If it feels right, you can share your city or country in the comments, a small sign of connection beneath the rain here. There's no need to hurry or remember anything at all. Lantern light glows softly through the mist, and the garden breathes in rhythm with the falling rain. Tonight, we'll step gently into the secret garden and allow the night to hold us, calm and unhurried, until rest comes naturally. Before we begin, take a moment to settle into the place where you're resting. Let your body grow heavy in the surface beneath you, as if it's gently holding you exactly where you belong. There's nothing you need to do right now, and nowhere you need to go. Just allow yourself to arrive. Take a slow breath in through your nose, easy and unforced, and let it drift out again through your mouth. Feel how the air moves without effort. With each breath, imagine the day loosening its grip, slipping quietly into the background. If there are thoughts still moving through your mind, that's perfectly okay. You don't need to push them away. Simply notice them and let them pass like distant clouds, leaving more space behind. Your shoulders soften, your jaw relaxes, even your brow smooths, as though it's remembering how to rest. Somewhere nearby, rain is falling gently. You don't need to picture it, clearly just sense the rhythm of it, steady and kind, creating a calm pattern that your breathing can follow. In this moment, you're safe to slow down. If you find comfort here, you might consider becoming part of this quiet place by subscribing to Whispers of the Night. It allows these gentle stories to find you again, waiting patiently whenever rest is needed. You can also leave a soft like or a kind comment. Helps this peaceful space continue to grow. Now, allow your breathing to become even slower, longer exhales, softer inhales. With every breath, you drift a little deeper into ease, preparing your mind to wander gently, without effort, into tonight's story. When you're ready, let the sounds carry you forward. The secret garden. The rain that leads home. The rain had been falling for so long that it no longer felt like weather, but like a companion. It drifted down from a sky wrapped in soft gray, touching the countryside with patient hands. Each drop landed gently on leaves and stone and earth, blending into a quiet, steady rhythm that smoothed the edges of the day. The air was cool and fresh, carrying the deep, comforting scent of wet soil and crushed grass. Somewhere far away, thunder murmured, so softly it felt less like a warning and more like a lullaby rolling across the hills. Alina walked along the narrow road at an unhurried pace, her footsteps barely louder than the rain itself. She had been traveling for most of the day, and though her body felt tired, her mind was calm, as if the rain had slowly rinsed away every urgent thought. She held her umbrella lightly above her, listening to the faint, hollow taps of raindrops as they gathered and slid away. Her coat felt warm enough, her breath steady, her shoulders relaxed. There was no rush to arrive anywhere in particular. The journey itself seemed to be guiding her, one quiet step at a time. On either side of the road, fields stretched out in gentle curves, their colors softened by mist. Trees stood like patient listeners, their branches darkened by rain leaves, shining with a soft, muted glow. Occasionally, a small stream appeared beside the path, newly fed by the weather, its surface trembling with tiny ripples. Alina paused once to watch the water move, feeling the slow pull of rest settle deeper into her chest. It was the kind of evening that asked for nothing and promised even less, except the simple comfort of being present. As the light faded, the road bent slightly, and through the veil of rain and mist, something new came into view. At the edge of a small village, set back from the road, stood an old estate. Its stone walls rose quietly from the earth, worn smooth by time and softened by ivy that climbed and curled without urgency. Moss clung to the lower stones, deep green and velvety, as if the house had grown naturally from the land itself. The roof sloped gently, rainwater tracing slow, silvery paths toward the ground. At first glance, the estate seemed empty, perhaps even forgotten. The windows were dark, the gate slightly open, the path leading inward covered in fallen leaves. And yet, as Alina looked more closely, she noticed a single window glowing with warm, golden light. It was not bright or demanding. It simply existed, steady and calm, like a candle left burning for whoever might need it. The sight brought a quiet sense of relief, easing something inside her that she hadn't realized had been tight. She hesitated, only for a moment before stepping through the open gate. The gravel beneath her shoes shifted softly, a gentle sound that blended with the rain. The path curved toward the house, lined with low shrubs and old flower beds, now resting for the season. Everything felt still, but not abandoned, as if the estate were simply pausing, waiting patiently for the right moment to breathe again. When Alina reached the door, she closed her umbrella and shook the rain from its edges, listening as droplets fell to the stone steps below. The door opened easily, without a creak or complaint, and she stepped inside. Warm air wrapped around her at once, carrying the faint scent of wood and old paper. The outside world seemed to soften and fade as the door closed gently behind her. Inside, the estate was quiet in a way that felt intentional, not silent, but peaceful. Somewhere deeper within the house, an antique clock ticked steadily, each sound spaced evenly, like a slow heartbeat. The floors were wooden, worn smooth by years of footsteps, and rugs lay in familiar places, their patterns faded but welcoming. Lamps glowed softly, their light spilling across walls lined with framed paintings and photographs, their details muted by time. Alina moved carefully, not because she felt unwelcome, but because the space invited respect. She set her umbrella near the door and removed her coat, placing it neatly over the back of a chair. The simple act felt grounding, as if she were setting down not just her belongings, but the weight of the day itself. She took a slow breath, listening to the rain as it continued its gentle conversation with the roof. A note rested on a small table near the entrance. Written in careful, looping handwriting, it explained, in a few kind words, that travelers were welcome to rest here when the road felt long. The house, it said, had once been full of voices and laughter, and though many of those voices had moved on, the walls still remembered how to offer comfort. Alina smiled softly, feeling as though the house itself had spoken to her. She explored only a little, allowing her curiosity to unfold at the same unhurried pace as the evening. Each room she passed held the same calm stillness, a sitting room, with deep chairs positioned near a fireplace, its ashes cold but tidy, a dining room with a long table, polished to a gentle shine, waiting patiently for company, bookshelves lined one hallway, filled with volumes that smelled faintly of dust and ink, their spines worn from years of careful hands. Eventually, Alina found herself near a window that looked out onto the grounds behind the estate. Rain slid slowly down the glass, blurring the view beyond into soft shapes and shifting shadows. She could just make out the suggestion of trees and hedges, and somewhere farther back, the darker outline of something enclosed, perhaps a wall or gate. It stirred a mild curiosity, but not enough to draw her closer just yet. The night seemed to be encouraging rest rather than discovery. She made her way to a small guest room, already prepared as if it had been expecting her. The bed was neatly made, the blankets thick and inviting. A lamp on the bedside table cast a warm pool of light, and beside it rested a small book, its pages slightly yellowed, waiting to be read or simply admired. Alina sat on the edge of the bed and let her shoulders drop, feeling the last traces of travel leave her body. Outside, the rain grew a little heavier, though still gentle. It drummed softly against the roof, the sound spreading evenly across the house. Alina lay back and pulled the blanket around her, listening as water traced its paths along the gutters and eaves. The clock's ticking continued, steady and reassuring, reminding her that time was moving slowly, kindly, without any need to hurry. As she rested there, her thoughts drifted naturally, without effort. She remembered the note by the door and the quiet sense of welcome it had offered. She wondered about the people who had once lived here, who had walked these halls and tended the grounds beyond the windows. Somewhere in her mind, the idea of a garden surfaced, not as a clear image, but as a feeling, a place cared for gently, allowed to grow at its own pace. Much like the night unfolding around her now, the rain seemed to deepen, not louder, but fuller, as if the sky were settling in for a long, unbroken conversation with the earth. Alina closed her eyes, her breathing slowing to match the rhythm outside. Each inhale felt cool and fresh, each exhale warm and relaxed. The house held her quietly, its walls steady and kind. In that soft space between waking and sleep, her curiosity returned, gentle and unpressing. Somewhere beyond the rain-washed windows, something waited. Not urgently, not insistently, but patiently. Whatever it was, garden or memory or simple possibility, felt content to remain unseen for now. Trusting the night to do its work, the rain continued without hurry, smoothing the world and carrying its quiet promise forward, easing the way toward morning light yet to come. Morning drizzle and locked gates. Morning arrived without any clear beginning, as if the night had simply softened and changed its tone. Light filtered gently through layers of gray cloud, spreading evenly across the estate grounds. The rain had quieted into a fine drizzle, so light it seemed to hover rather than fall, touching leaves and stone with careful precision. The air felt freshly washed, cool and clean, carrying the scent of damp earth and green growth. Everything looked calmer, smoother, as though the world had been given time to rest and reset. Alina woke slowly, wrapped in that peaceful stillness. For a few moments, she remained where she was, listening. The steady rain of the night before had softened into a delicate tapping against the window, almost like a whisper. Somewhere in the house, the familiar clock continued its gentle ticking, marking time without pressure. She stretched beneath the blanket, feeling rested in a way that surprised her, as if sleep had reached deeper than usual. When she rose and looked outside, she saw the grounds transformed. Mist lingered low over the grass, blurring the edges of shrubs and trees. Droplets clung to every surface, turning leaves into small mirrors that caught the pale morning light. It felt like the sort of morning that asked to be noticed slowly, without any plans or expectations attached. After dressing, Alina made her way downstairs. The house felt brighter now, though still hushed, as if it preferred to speak softly in daylight. She paused near the door, slipping on her shoes and lifting her umbrella, even though the drizzle was light. Stepping outside, she felt the cool air brush her face, refreshing and gentle. Stone paths led away from the estate in quiet curves, their surfaces darkened by rainwater and faintly reflective. Alina followed one at an unhurried pace, letting her steps fall naturally into rhythm. Overgrown hedges lined the path, their branches heavy with moisture, bending slightly under the weight of it. Occasionally, a droplet slipped free and fell, landing with a sound so soft it was nearly imagined. Birds stirred in the trees, their calls low and unassertive, as though they, too, were mindful of the morning's calm. Their songs floated through the mist, brief and gentle, adding a sense of quiet life to the air. Alina felt herself breathing more deeply, her thoughts moving at the same unhurried pace as her steps as she explored. Small details began to reveal themselves. Beneath the softened greenery, signs of careful care lingered. A stone archway stood partly hidden by vines, its shape still graceful despite the passage of time. A wooden bench rested beneath an old tree, its surface weathered smooth, as though many people had once sat there quietly, listening to the same rain and birdsong. Flower beds edged the paths, resting now, but still shaped by thoughtful hands from years before. The estate grounds did not feel abandoned. They felt paused, like a breath held gently, waiting for the right moment to continue. Alina found comfort in that feeling, sensing that nothing here had been lost, only set aside. As she turned along another path, she noticed something different ahead. Through the mist and trailing vines stood an iron gate, tall and slender, its dark metal softened by rust and entwined with creeping greenery. Ivy wound its way through the bars, leaves glossy with rain. The gate was closed, but not in a forbidding way. It simply stood there, quiet and patient, as if it had learned how to wait. Alina slowed, drawn closer by a calm sense of curiosity. She stopped a few steps away, watching as rainwater slid along the iron bars and disappeared into the earth beyond. Even without seeing what lay on the other side, she sensed life, their growth, fed by years of rain and quiet care. The gate felt less like a boundary and more like a gentle pause, an invitation to notice rather than to pass through. As she stood there, listening to the soft patter of drizzle on her umbrella, she became aware of another presence nearby. Footsteps approached slowly along the path behind her, steady and unhurried. Alina turned and saw an elderly man walking toward her, his movements calm and measured, as though he moved in harmony with the morning itself. He wore a simple jacket and sturdy shoes, both well-worn but neatly kept. His hair was silver gray, and his face carried the gentle lines of someone who had spent many years outdoors, attentive to seasons and weather. His eyes were kind and observant, holding a quiet warmth. When he spoke, his voice was low and even, as soothing as the drizzle around them. "Good morning," he said, offering a small, friendly smile. Alina returned the greeting, feeling instantly at ease. There was nothing abrupt or startling in his presence. He felt as much a part of the grounds as the paths and trees. "I'm Mr. Rowan," he continued gently. "I look after what still needs looking after around here." His words carried no sense of duty or burden, only acceptance. Alina told him her name, and they stood together for a moment, listening to the birds and rain. Mr. Rowan noticed her gaze resting on the iron gate. "That's the old garden," he said quietly. "We call it the secret garden, though it was never meant to be hidden forever." Alina listened, her curiosity deepening, though still calm and unpressing. Mr. Rowan spoke as if sharing something familiar, not guarding a mystery. "It was once a place where people came to sit and breathe," he continued. "They tended it slowly, no rush, just patience, rain, and gentle hands. When the estate grew quiet, the garden did too. It closed itself off, in a way." There was no sadness in his voice, only a soft acknowledgement of time passing as it naturally does. Alina imagined the garden in its earlier days, filled with careful footsteps and quiet moments, leaves rustling as people rested among them. "It still listens," Mr. Rowan added, "to the rain especially. Rain reminds it how to grow." Alina nodded, understanding without needing more explanation. She noticed again how the water slipped through the iron bars, seeping into the soil beyond, nourishing what could not yet be seen. The gate no longer felt locked in a strict sense. It felt protective, preserving something delicate until the moment was right. They walked together for a short while, Mr. Rowan pointing out details Alina might have missed. A stone set carefully to guide rainwater, a young plant growing where an older one had once stood. His knowledge seemed less about control and more about attention. He spoke of the grounds as one might speak of an old friend, familiar and respected. Eventually, he paused. "The garden will show itself when it's ready," he said softly. "Best not to hurry it." With a final kind nod, he continued on his way, his footsteps fading into the mist. Alina watched him go, feeling a gentle gratitude for the quiet exchange. The morning seemed to settle more deeply around her after his departure. She returned her attention to the iron gate, standing once more in stillness. The drizzle thinned further, the rain becoming barely more than moisture in the air. Mist drifted lazily across the path, softening everything it touched. Alina felt no urge to reach for the gate or test its lock. Simply being near it felt enough. After a while, she turned back toward the house, following the stone path as it curved gently through the grounds. The estate stood waiting, its windows now reflecting the pale morning light. Inside, warmth and quiet awaited, along with the promise of tea and rest. As Alina stepped indoors, she glanced back once more through the doorway. The iron gate was no longer clearly visible, hidden again by mist and distance. Yet the sense of it remained steady and patient. The drizzle faded almost entirely, leaving behind a cool hush. Somewhere beyond the hedges and walls, the garden rested, listening and breathing, content to wait. And Alina, carrying that calm curiosity with her, felt certain that when the time came, the garden would open in its own gentle way. The garden begins to breathe. Evening arrived slowly, wrapped in layers of cloud that thickened as the light faded. Instead, it dimmed gently, as though someone were turning down a lamp little by tapping softly against the windows of the estate. This rain was different from the morning drizzle. It carried more weight, more rhythm. Each drop landed with purpose, forming a steady pattern that felt almost like breathing. The sound spread across the grounds, settling into the trees, the stone paths, and the quiet walls of the house. Was the kind of rain that did not hurry anything. Outside, the garden hedges blurred again into soft shapes, and the mist returned, curling low over the earth. Somewhere in the distance, leaves rustled as the rain gathered them into a shared hush. She felt a familiar pull in her chest, subtle but clear. It was the same feeling she'd had that morning near the iron gate. Not urgency, not excitement. Like remembering something she had once loved. Rain reminds it how to grow. Alina reached for her coat and stepped quietly out into the evening. The door closed behind her with a soft sound, and the rain greeted her immediately, cool and steady against her sleeves. She did not open her umbrella and shoulders as she followed the familiar stone path. The grounds felt different now than they had in the morning. Shadows rested more deeply beneath. The trees and the paths gleamed faintly where lantern lights spilled from the house behind her. The birds had gone silent, replaced by the soft, endless music of rainfall. Each step Alina took felt slower, more careful, as though the evening itself had asked her to move gently. When the iron gate came into view, she paused. Rain threaded its way through the vines, dripping steadily from leaf to leaf. The metal bars shone faintly, darkened by moisture and time. Everything about the gate looked softer in the rain, less solid, as if it had been waiting for this moment. Alina reached out and rested her hand against the cool iron. She did not pull right away. She simply stood there, breathing, listening. When she did press gently against the gate, it responded without resistance. The old lock, worn smooth by years of weather, shifted easily. There was no sharp sound, no sudden movement, just a quiet release, as though the gate itself had decided to open. She stepped inside. The garden welcomed her without ceremony. Rain fell through layers of leaves and branches, creating a soft, layered music that surrounded her completely. Tall grass bowed under the weight of water, swaying slowly with each breath of wind. Flowers leaned toward the earth, their colors cool and fresh, carrying the scent of soil and growing things. Alina sensed movement everywhere, not hurried, not restless, but steady and natural. Ancient trees rose above her, their branches stretching wide, leaves whispering softly as the rain passed through them. The sound felt like a conversation spoken too gently to interrupt. She moved forward carefully, choosing her steps with thought, not wanting to disturb the quiet balance that seemed to hold the garden together. Beneath her feet, she felt uneven. A path revealed itself slowly, half hidden beneath moss and fallen leaves, its edges softened by time. She followed it, letting it guide her without question. Rainwater gathered along the stones, flowing in small, patient streams. Every surface glistened, reflecting dim light from the sky above. Alina felt as though she had stepped into a place that existed between moments, neither asleep nor awake, simply resting in itself. As she walked, memories surfaced quietly, the way thoughts sometimes do when the mind is calm. She remembered evenings from long ago, sitting near a window as rain traced patterns on glass. She remembered how she used to listen closely, imagining stories in the rhythm of rainfall, finding comfort in its steady presence. The garden seemed to hold space for those memories, not calling them forth, but allowing them to rise naturally. Nothing rushed her. It felt as though the garden understood exactly how much to offer and when to remain quiet. She came upon a small clearing where the path widened slightly. At its center stood a low stone fountain, worn smooth and rounded by years of water and weathered. Rain fell directly into its shallow basin, causing gentle ripples that spread outward and touched the edges before fading away. The fountain overflowed slowly, water slipping over its sides and returning to the earth below. Alina stood there for a long moment, watching the steady cycle repeat itself. There was no dramatic movement, no sharp sound, just rain arriving, water. The simplicity of it felt deeply calming. She knelt beside the fountain and rested her fingertips in the cool water. The sensation grounded her, bringing her fully into the present moment. Rain continued to fall around her, soft and even, brushing her skin with quiet insistence. She felt no discomfort, only a sense of belonging, as though the garden had accepted her presence without question. Around her, the garden breathed. Grass shifted gently, leaves lifted. Alina realized then that the garden was not abandoned. It was resting, much like the estate itself, waiting without impatience. She rose and continued along the path, letting it curve naturally through the space. At times, branches brushed her sleeves, cool and damp. At others, the path opened briefly to reveal clusters of flowers glowing faintly in the dim light, their colors muted but rich. Each turn offered something small and quiet, never overwhelming. Alina felt a deep sense of companionship, though she was alone. The garden did not speak, did not reveal secrets in words or signs. Its presence was enough. It offered stillness, the kind that settles gently into the chest and remains there long after the moment has passed. The rain maintained its steady rhythm, never growing louder, never fading away completely. It guided her thoughts, smoothing their edges, carrying away anything sharp or restless. She realized how long it had been since she had felt this unburdened, this quietly content with simply being where she was. Eventually, the light shifted again, growing dimmer as night fully arrived. The sky above the trees deepened into a soft, dark gray, and the garden took on a quieter tone. Alina sensed, without any urgency, that it was time to leave. The garden did not close itself off. It did not change its mood. It simply allowed the moment to end naturally. She followed the path back toward the gate, her steps unhurried. When she reached it, she paused and looked back once more. Rain continued to fall, nourishing everything within, whispering its steady song. The garden felt peaceful, complete in its rest. Alina stepped out and closed the gate gently behind her. The latch settled into place without a sound. She did not feel locked out. She felt reassured, knowing the garden would remain breathing quietly in the rain. As she walked back toward the estate, the warmth of the house grew nearer, its windows glowing softly through the mist. Rain followed her all the way, a calm companion guiding her steps. Inside, she dried her hands and settled into a quiet chair near the window. The rain continued its gentle rhythm outside, and Alina carried the garden's peace with her, letting it settle deep within. As night stretched on, the steady sound invited rest, and she sensed that the garden, like the rain, would be waiting again when morning returned. Stories beneath the old roof. The rain settled into the evening like a familiar song, tapping gently against the tall windows of the estate. Each drop arrived without urgency, as if it knew there was nowhere else it needed to be. The sky outside had deepened into a calm shade of indigo, neither fully dark nor holding onto the last light of day. Clouds moved slowly overhead, their edges softened by the steady fall of rain, and the world beyond the glass felt distant, hushed, and kind. Inside the house, warmth gathered in unhurried layers. A small fire burned in the hearth, its glow spreading across the room in quiet waves of amber and gold. The light touched the old wooden beams overhead, revealing their gentle curves and time-smoothed grain, then drifted downward to the stone floor beneath Elena's feet. Every surface seemed to absorb the warmth rather than reflect it, holding it close as if the house itself understood the value of comfort. Alina sat in a deep chair near the fire, its cushions shaped by years of patient use. She cradled a cup of tea in both hands, letting its warmth seep slowly into her palms. The porcelain was smooth and pale, faintly translucent in the firelight. Steam rose in delicate threads, carrying with it the subtle scent of herbs, something floral, something grounding before dissolving into the air. Each breath she took felt fuller than the last, her chest rising and falling in a steady, relaxed rhythm. Across from her, Mr. Rowan rested in a well-worn armchair, his posture easy, his movements minimal. He seemed perfectly placed there, as though the chair had been waiting for him specifically. Firelight softened the lines of his face, easing them into gentle curves, shaped more by thoughtfulness than by age. His eyes reflected the flames, not brightly, but steadily, as if they had learned long ago how to observe without holding on. Outside, the rain continued its patient work, tracing slow, wandering paths down the tall windows. Droplets gathered, merged, and slid downward in quiet patterns, leaving faint, temporary trails behind. The sound blended seamlessly with the soft crackle of burning logs, creating a cocoon of gentle noise that wrapped itself around the room. Alina felt her shoulders lower, almost without her noticing, tension loosening, as though it had finally been given permission to leave. Mr. Rowan lifted his cup and took a small sip, careful and unhurried, then placed it back on the table beside him. The movement felt deliberate, but not stiff, like someone who had learned that slowing down was not a loss, but a gift. When he spoke, his voice was calm and even, carrying no urgency, no need to impress or explain. "This house," he said, quietly, "has always listened more than it spoke." Alina smiled faintly, her gaze drifting back to the fire. She watched as a log shifted, sending a soft cascade of sparks upward before settling again. The words lingered in the room, not demanding a response. Silence followed naturally, welcomed, like a familiar companion rather than an awkward pause. Mr. Rowan continued after a while, his eyes lifting toward the ceiling where old beams crossed overhead like patient guardians. "The people who came here long ago," he said, "they weren't searching for answers. They weren't trying to fix the garden or themselves." He paused, letting the rain fill the space between his thoughts. They came to sit, to notice, to breathe. The rain seemed to agree, its rhythm steady and affirming. Alina imagined the house in earlier years, lit by softer lamps, warmed by the same fire, holding the same quiet. She pictured figures from the past moving gently through these rooms, setting down heavy thoughts as easily as coats by the door. The image brought her a deep sense of continuity, as though this evening was part of a long, unbroken thread stretching calmly through time. "The garden," Mr. Rowan said, his voice barely louder than the fire, "has always been patient. It doesn't ask for attention, only presence." He smiled softly. Rainy nights were its favorite. People slowed down then. They stayed longer, spoke less. Alina wrapped her fingers more firmly around her cup, feeling the last of the warmth travel into her hands. She thought of the garden paths she had walked, the way moss softened the stones, the way water gathered and moved without effort, nothing forced, nothing rushed. It felt like a lesson she had once understood deeply, then misplaced somewhere. Along the way, the fire shifted again, sending shadows gently dancing across the walls. They stretched and shrank in slow, patient motion, never startling, never sharp. The room felt quietly alive, as though every sound and movement had been carefully chosen to support rest. There were caretakers here, Mr. Rowan continued. Some who stayed for years, others who came only for a season. But all of them learned the same thing, eventually. He paused, allowing the rain to speak for him. That rest isn't something you earn, he said softly. It's something you remember. The words settled into Elena's chest with unexpected ease. She felt them sink beneath the surface of her thoughts, resting somewhere deeper. She hadn't realized how tightly she had been holding herself together until now. How much of her life had been shaped by motion rather than meaning. Sitting here, wrapped in warmth and sound, she felt a gentle release, like opening a hand she hadn't known was clenched. Her eyes wandered slowly around the room, noticing details she had overlooked before. The curve of the mantel, worn smooth by countless hands. The faint marks on the floor, evidence of quiet steps taken over many years. The way the firelight reached even the far corners, leaving nothing untouched. The estate no longer felt like a place she had stumbled upon by chance. It felt intentional, waiting. Mr. Rowan leaned back slightly, his chair responding with a soft creak before settling again. On nights like this, he said, people would gather here after spending time in the garden. They didn't bring stories of what they'd done. His smile returned, small and knowing. They brought the quiet with them. Elena imagined rain-darkened coats hanging near the hearth, the scent of damp earth following visitors inside. She imagined shared silence, broken only by the sound of rain and the steady breathing of people who felt safe enough to rest. The image felt comforting, like a memory she had somehow inherited. Her tea had cooled now, but she didn't mind. She took a small sip, the warmth still gentle, still present. Everything about the moment felt unhurried, as though time itself had taken a seat by the fire and decided to stay a while. You seem to understand this place, Elena said softly, her voice blending easily into the room. Mr. Rowan nodded, his expression kind and open. I've had time, he replied simply, and I learned to listen. They sat together without speaking for a while. The rain never faltered, never grew louder or softer. It simply continued, a steady companion to the evening. Elena felt her thoughts slow, smoothing out one by one, like stones beneath flowing water. The quiet didn't empty her mind, it organized it. She realized then that her journey hadn't been about finding shelter from the rain, or even discovering the garden. It had been about remembering how to be still without feeling lost, how to rest without guilt. The estate, the garden, the rain, all of it seemed to exist for that purpose alone. As the evening deepened, the fire burned lower, shifting from lively flame to glowing embers. The light softened further, wrapping the room in a gentle amber hush. Mr. Rowan rose slowly, adding another log to the hearth with careful movements that didn't disturb the calm. The fire responded with a quiet crackle, then settled once more. Elena felt no urge to leave, no sense of unfinished thought. Instead, she felt complete, as though this quiet understanding was enough to carry her forward. The garden will still be there, Mr. Rowan said gently, as if answering something she hadn't spoken. It reveals itself best when you're not looking too hard. Elena nodded, her eyelids growing heavier. She wasn't ready for sleep just yet, but she felt it approaching, unthreatening and kind. Outside, the rain deepened slightly, its rhythm slower now, like a long, steady breath. When the fire had faded to a warm glow and the teacups stood empty, Elena rose and wished Mr. Rowan a soft good night. He returned her smile, peaceful and assured. "Rest well," he said. "The garden waits patiently." She moved through the hallways with gentle steps, the floor cool beneath her feet, the air calm and still. When she reached her room, she paused by the window, watching rain blur the world into soft shapes and muted light. The estate no longer felt unfamiliar. It felt understanding. As Alina settled in, the rain continued, steady and kind. And somewhere, beyond the walls, beneath the sheltering night, the garden breathed, quietly holding its stories, waiting calmly, ready to welcome stillness whenever it was needed. Rainlight and renewal. Before dawn, the world rested in a delicate pause, balanced gently between night and morning. The sky had not yet chosen its color, holding instead a quiet blend of deep blue and soft gray, like fabric folded carefully and set aside. Nothing hurried this moment. Time itself seemed to linger, as if waiting for permission to continue. Rain fell quietly, lighter now than it had been through the night, each drop landing with patience and care. Along the garden paths, lanterns still glowed, their light warm and steady. The glow caught the falling rain and turned each droplet into a brief spark before it disappeared into the waiting earth. Mist drifted low to the ground, moving slowly, reshaping the space with every breath of air. The garden felt held in a gentle stillness. Awake but unexpected, Alina moved through the estate with careful, unhurried steps, wrapped in a light coat that brushed softly against her wrists. Her breath was slow and even, rising and falling in time with the rain. Behind her, the house still slept. Its windows remained dark, its rooms settled into a deep and peaceful silence, as though the walls themselves were resting. Outside, the garden waited. It did not call to her or announce itself. It simply remained open and calm, as though it had known she would return at this hour, when the world felt thin and quiet and full of possibility. Alina followed the familiar path toward the iron gate, her footsteps softened by damp stone and moss. The gate greeted her without sound. Its iron bars were cool beneath her hand, familiar now, no longer a boundary but an invitation. As she stepped inside, the rain seemed to soften further, brushing her sleeves and hair with quiet kindness. It did not soak or chill her. It rested lightly, as if mindful of her presence. The air within the garden felt fresh and clean, filled with the scent of damp soil, rain-darkened leaves, and flowers newly rinsed by the night. Every breath carried something grounding, something real. Alina paused just beyond the gate, allowing herself to take it in slowly. The garden looked different now, not changed in any dramatic or sudden way, but subtly renewed. Flowers that had leaned heavily beneath yesterday's rain now stood a little taller, their stems steadier, their petals washed clean and gently brightened. Leaves gleamed with a soft sheen, catching lantern light along their edges like quiet outlines. The stone paths appeared clearer, their shapes more defined. Moss, still present but calmer, settled comfortably into the cracks where it belonged. Alina felt no urge to move right away. She stood there, letting the garden reveal itself at its own pace. It did not feel younger or older than before. It felt rested. When she did begin to walk, her steps were slow and thoughtful, following the familiar curves of the path. Rain continued its quiet rhythm, no longer something happening around her, but something she moved with, something she belonged to. Each step felt guided not by intention, but by instinct, as though her body already understood how to move through this place. As she walked, she noticed small things that could be tended without effort or expectation. A thin branch had fallen across part of the path, likely brought down by the night's rain. Alina lifted it gently, surprised by how light it felt, and leaned it against a nearby tree where it could rest without blocking the way. She straightened a stone that had shifted slightly from its place, its position becoming clear the moment her fingers touched it. There was no sense of work in these movements, no pressure to complete or improve. They felt more like small conversations, quiet responses to simple invitations. The garden accepted each gesture without comment. Nothing changed suddenly. Nothing demanded more. Lantern light flickered softly as mist drifted through it, revealing patches of grass and clusters of flowers, still heavy with moisture. Rainwater gathered in shallow pools along the stones, reflecting the pale sky above. In broken pieces, Alina watched as ripples formed and faded, each one brief and complete, never lingering longer than it should. Her breathing slowed further, matching the rhythm of the rain. Thoughts that once crowded her mind felt distant now, softened and thinned like mist lifting from the ground. Worries that usually pressed close no longer reached her. She felt present in a way that required no effort at all, simply existing where she was, exactly as she was. She reached the fountain again, its basin filled nearly to the edge. Rain slipped into it gently, each drop adding to the whole without disturbance. The water overflowed just enough to keep it moving, never still, never hurried. Alina rested her hand on the cool stone rim and watched the water trace its familiar path, gathering, spilling, returning to the earth below. The fountain did not sparkle or shine. It did not need to. Its quiet purpose was enough. Standing there, Alina realized something with calm clarity. The garden had never asked to be restored. It had not waited for someone to return it to what it once was. It had only asked for attention, for presence, for someone willing to notice its steady breathing and move alongside it rather than against it. Her thoughts drifted gently to her own life beyond the estate. She thought of the ways she had often felt pulled forward, urged to fix, improve, hurry. How rest had sometimes felt like something to earn, something postponed. Here, none of that mattered. The garden offered a different lesson, one that settled slowly and deeply within her. Rain continued to fall, gentle and faithful. Alina began to move again, not following a plan, simply letting her feet carry her where they wished. At times, she paused to brush fallen leaves from a stone bench. At others, she stood still, listening to the sound of rain shifting as it moved through branches and leaves, changing tone but never breaking rhythm. The garden responded not with visible change, but with a sense of shared calm. The quiet effort felt mutual, like two old friends sitting together, each content to do very little, each understanding that presence was enough. Gradually, the sky began to lighten. It happened so slowly that Alina barely noticed at first. Darkness thinned, replaced by a pale glow that spread evenly across the clouds. Lantern light grew softer in comparison, their warm halos blending gently with the approaching day until they felt almost unnecessary. The rain did not stop, it simply changed, growing lighter still, each drop falling with even more care. The garden seemed to exhale, its colors deepening and settling into balance. Greens grew richer, stone softened, air felt open and clear. Alina felt a warmth in her chest, a quiet gratitude that did not need words. She had not come here to transform the garden, and the garden had not transformed her. Instead, they had met in stillness, offering each other space. She took one last slow walk along the path, letting the memory of each detail settle gently into her mind. The curve of a branch, the way water clung to petals, the soft glow of lanterns fading into morning light. Each image felt complete, whole, needing no explanation. When she reached the gate, Alina paused and looked back. The garden stood quietly behind her, refreshed by rain, awake and calm. It did not feel hidden anymore, not because it had been revealed, but because it no longer needed to be sought. As daylight grew stronger, filtering through the thinning clouds, Alina sensed her time here, gently drawing to a close. There was no sadness in the thought, only understanding. The garden's gift was not something that ended at the gate. It was something she could carry with her, quietly and faithfully. Wherever she went, the rain continued, soft and steady, as Alina stepped away, leaving the garden breathing peacefully in the growing light. Carrying the garden within. The rain had thinned to a quiet mist by the time Alina stood at the edge of the estate, her coat lightly damp, the air cool against her cheeks. Morning had begun to arrive without ceremony, easing itself into the world. The way a careful hand smooths a folded cloth. The sky was no longer dark, yet not fully bright, just pale enough to promise daylight without hurrying it along. Everything felt suspended in a gentle in-between, as though the night itself was reluctant to leave. The garden lay behind her, breathing softly. The lanterns that had glowed through the rain were now dim, their light barely needed as the mist caught the growing gray-blue of dawn. Leaves still shimmered with moisture, and the earth held the scent of fresh rain, deep and grounding. Alina took a slow breath and felt it fill her chest easily, without effort, without thought. Even the act of breathing felt different here, unburdened and complete. She had not planned her departure. It had arrived quietly, the way understanding often does. Not announced, but simply present. There was nothing left to finish, nothing undone. The garden did not ask her to stay longer, nor did it urge her away. It simply existed, calm and steady, trusting her to sense when it was time. Footsteps approached along the gravel path, unhurried and familiar. Mr. Rowan appeared through the thinning mist, his coat neatly buttoned, his silver hair touched softly by the morning light. He moved as though the garden shaped his pace, not the other way around. When he stopped beside her, his expression carried the same gentle awareness Alina had come to recognize, quiet, observant, and warm, without being intrusive. "You're leaving with the rain," he said softly, his voice low and even, as if not to disturb the moment. Alina smiled, small and sincere. "It feels like the right time." Mr. Rowan nodded, as though he had expected no other answer. He turned his gaze toward the garden, where the mist drifted slowly between branches and hedges. "It always is," he replied, "when you don't rush it." They stood together for a while without speaking. Words did not feel necessary here. The garden seemed to hold space for silence, treating it not as emptiness, but as something full and alive. Somewhere nearby, water dripped from a leaf into a shallow stone basin, the sound gentle and rhythmic. "The gate stays open," Mr. Rowan said at last, his tone light but meaningful, "for anyone willing to slow down enough to notice it." Alina followed his gaze to the iron gate, resting slightly ajar, just as it had been when she first arrived. It did not stand as an entrance or an exit, not truly. It felt more like a suggestion, an invitation, waiting patiently for the right moment. She reached out and touched its cool surface, familiar now beneath her fingers. "I think I understand that," she said quietly. Mr. Rowan smiled then, not wide, but knowing. It was the kind of smile that carried no expectation, no sense of instruction, just acknowledgement. "That's all the garden ever hoped for," he said. He stepped back after that, giving Alina space. She watched as he turned and made his way down another path, his figure gradually blending into the mist and pale light until he seemed less like a person and more like a natural part of the morning itself. The garden accepted his absence without pause, just as it had accepted her presence. Alina lingered by the gate, taking in one last view. The paths curved gently through the greenery, stones darkened by rain, edges softened by moss and time. Flowers rested quietly, their colors deepened, their petals still holding droplets that trembled now and then before slipping back into the soil. Nothing sparkled, nothing called for attention, and yet everything felt complete. She breathed again, slow and full, and noticed how easily calm rose within her. The familiar tension she often carried, tight shoulders, hurried thoughts, the feeling of always arriving late was absent. In its place was something steadier, not excitement, not joy exactly, but a deep comfort that sat low and warm, like a quiet fire that did not flicker. When Alina finally stepped through the gate, it did not close behind her. It remained just as it was, open enough to suggest return, open enough to remain unnoticed by anyone not looking for it. The mist wrapped lightly around her as she walked away, the gravel path damp beneath her shoes, the sound of her steps softened by the lingering rain. Beyond the estate, the world waited. Trees lined the road, their leaves stirring faintly in the early breeze. The sky continued its slow brightening, clouds thinning and stretching as daylight gathered strength. Yet everything felt gentler now, as though the calm of the garden had quietly followed her, settling into the spaces between sounds, into the pauses between thoughts. As Alina walked, she noticed the rain again, not falling now, but remembered. The steady rhythm from the night before lingered in her mind, like a familiar melody that returns unbidden and brings comfort rather than distraction. She could almost hear it in the hush of the morning, in the way the mist drifted, in the distant call of a bird waking somewhere beyond the trees. With each step, she became more aware of something new, or perhaps something she had always carried, but never recognized. The garden had not stayed behind her. It had not remained locked within iron gates or stone paths. Its quiet order, its patient acceptance, had settled inside her, arranging itself gently within her breath and posture and pace. She realized then that calm was not a place. It was a way of moving, a way of noticing. The garden had simply reminded her. The road curved slightly, leading her farther from the estate, though she could still feel its presence like a steady anchor at her back. She did not look over her shoulder. There was no need. What mattered had already come with her. Alina thought of moments in her life when she had rushed through days without seeing them, when her thoughts had leaped endlessly ahead, never resting long enough to feel where she stood. She remembered how often she had believed peace was something to be earned later, after tasks were completed, after worries were solved. The garden had offered a different truth, one that felt both simple and profound. Stillness could exist alongside movement. Calm did not require permission. As the mist continued to lift, the world around her seemed to echo this understanding. Sounds were clearer, but softer, distant footsteps, the rustle of leaves, the quiet hum of a morning beginning its slow work. Even the air felt kinder, cool without sharpness, fresh without urgency. She adjusted her coat and felt how her shoulders settled naturally, no longer drawn tight. Her thoughts moved more slowly now, not sluggish, but smooth, like water flowing over stones rather than crashing against them. The steady rhythm of her steps became its own quiet meditation, each footfall grounding her further in the present moment. Somewhere behind her, the garden continued its quiet life. Rainwater soaked deeper into the soil, roots drinking patiently, leaves dried at their own pace. Paths remained as they were, shaped by time and care rather than force. It did not matter who returned next or when. The garden would be ready, not because it waited, but because it knew how to be. Alina carried that knowing with her as the road widened and signs of the outer world became clearer. Distant fence, a narrow bridge, the faint outline of buildings waking beyond the trees. She noticed that nothing felt overwhelming. The world had not changed. It was still busy, still full of movement and demand, but her way of meeting it had softened. She paused once, just for a moment, standing still as mist curled gently around her ankles. She closed her eyes and listened. The quiet did not vanish when she stopped moving. It remained steady and accessible, as close as her own breath. She understood then that the garden was no longer somewhere she had to go. It was something she could return to simply by slowing down, by noticing, by allowing space. When she opened her eyes, the morning had brightened a little more. The sky held a pale glow, even and reassuring. The rain had faded almost completely now, leaving behind only dampness and memory. Alina smiled softly, feeling rested in a way that sleep alone had never given her. She continued on, unhurried, as the estate disappeared fully from view, replaced by the ordinary shapes of roads and fields and waking life. Alina carried with her the sound of rain, the image of lantern light through mist, the steady presence of stone paths and breathing leaves. These were not souvenirs to be kept carefully aside. They were threads now woven into her awareness, ready to surface whenever the world grew too loud or too fast. The day ahead did not feel heavy. It felt open. And somewhere, in the quiet spaces between moments, the garden remained patient, welcoming, alive, waiting, not behind a gate, but within her, and within anyone who chose to pause long enough to listen. The last of the rain softened into silence. The morning settled into its gentle rhythm, and the night, having done its quiet work, stepped back at last. In that calm hush, sleep felt close and kind, inviting rest not as an ending, but as a peaceful return to stillness. As the rain softens into silence, let your thoughts rest where they've settled. The garden remains with you, quiet and patient, just beneath the surface of your breath. There's nothing more to hold onto. Tonight, sleep can arrive gently in its own time. Good night from Whispers of the Night.